You said that it was important for you to carry on this Jain diet when you went into like your college and your university and doing your degree. Why was
Yeah.
it so important to you to carry it forward? And how did you have those principles so embedded in you? Because, for example, like I've always been quite rebellious when I was younger. So if my parents tell me something, I'd probably do the opposite. So like, why was it so like important to you for you to carry it on?
Yeah, I think, from a young age, my mom has always been such a big influence in my spiritual journey and understanding. I think it was always something like anything in Jainism, when you're a child, it seems like, oh, these are just rules. Like my mom is telling me to do this, so I have to do it. But I think I am lucky that my parents took the time to explain the reasoning why at a very young age and developing that understanding. So, when I was younger, my mom explained to me the reason why we don't eat meat or why we don't eat root vegetables. And, for Jains, the reason for avoiding these foods are because we try to do the least harm possible, right? And of course, with animals, it's clear, obvious that that's doing harm. But when people think of plants, and within that, we're getting down to the almost like molecular level, right? So in Jainism, root vegetables are believed to have a lot of microorganisms and life in them. And when we look at kind of the big picture of how can we sustain our lives here, but with the utmost compassion and care in our daily actions, many strict Jains try to omit these vegetables as well, because they believe there are millions of souls or lives within those organisms that when you consume these, you're harming or killing. So for me, I was like, okay, like there are like 4 or 5 vegetables I can't eat. That's fine. It's okay. And because my mom made such delicious food, I never really thought of it as like an absence, right?
Yeah.
The times where I felt most challenged, though, like, of course, are when, when you're younger and you're with like a friend's family or you're at a birthday party and things like that, where you might not have that ability yet to make that discernment. And I think throughout it all, I'm just like so gracious that my mom's always like given options for me. And like, it's never been like, this is the rule, like you can't do it, or like, you're in trouble kind of thing. But it's more of that understanding and like, do the best you can. And I think that still carries forward today, or like, when you travel or, when you're not in your home kitchen, sometimes it's still hard to follow that. And I'll be honest, like there are times where I may have to make exceptions for root vegetables, but I try my best to limit that whenever and however I can. And I think the first place that starts is in the home, right? So what you bring home is going to like dictate how you carry that out, right? So like cooking from scratch has been a great way to not only be able to continue practicing that, but also know what's going into my food and be more health conscious about it. So I think it's like a combination of a lot of things. And I think I just give a lot of credit to the way that my parents raised us with understanding that principle and allowing us to make that choice and carry it forward. So.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really important what you said there about 2 things. Firstly, the understanding and the reasoning. And that's something that for the first 14 years or 15, 16 years of my life, I lacked. I didn't have any real reasons within my experience of life. And that's why I was quite rebellious. But I think it's so important because children or anyone really wants to learn, especially like us growing up in the Western world where we get educated and we get taught to ask questions. So the fact that your parents could actually answer your questions is something that's really commendable to them, I'd say. And also like that choice as well, the openness that this is what we believe and this is how we want to live life, and it's up to you. And that gives you that kind of freedom, and then it's your choice. And And one thing that I'm quite jealous of is the delicious food that you probably had when you were younger. I think that makes a difference, right? Because then it doesn't feel like a sacrifice. Like
exactly.
I've always been told, like, how have you never had meat in your life, for example, right? And I go, I've never missed it because I've never had it, and I've always had great food. So it's never been like a burning desire for me to even taste or even look at it this way. And just one more thing about what you said is really important is the idea of ahimsa. Like, obviously, like that's such a key principle in Jainism. And people see like, oh, I don't eat meat, but my not eating meat is like the result of my belief. It's not the first thing that I do, because I've incorporated ahimsa in my life. Like, for example, at night, my grandma wouldn't step on grass when she was living. You know, like they'd be so careful with, like, about how they live their life. It's not just about your diet; it's about literally your lifestyle. And I think what you said as well about so are you vegan, by the way? Like, have you grown to be Jain and vegan as well?
Yeah. So over the last 4 to 5 years, I'd say I really started to think a little bit more about my diet. And in that process was reflecting on, you know, the reasons why I follow such a strict diet, or like try to stick to not eating roots and things like that. And in Jainism, the way that we look at karma and harm to living beings, there's this idea of hierarchy, right? Like 5 cents, 4 cents, 3 cents living being, 2 and 1. And, you know, a cow will be your 5 cents living being, and your plants will be a 1 cent living being. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, with this principle, we're trying to avoid these doing harm to root vegetables, which are 1 cent living beings, but of course have millions of, Jains believe, have millions of life microorganisms in them. But how are we omitting the fact that there's so much violence behind the dairy industry, and we're, you know, why is it okay to be harming this 5 cents living being with this theory, right?
Yeah.
And through that process, I was like, you know, it doesn't make sense. Like, if I'm trying to follow a Jain diet, like this has to be part of it. And it's been a gradual transition. I think it's really hard, you know, and I imagine the same for somebody who's like going from eating non-vegetarian food all their life and trying to become vegetarian or vegan. Like, there's something that's been so substantial in your life and in your culture and like in everything you've done that you've never really questioned until this point. And you know, to quit anything so quickly overnight is hard to sustain, right? So it's been a gradual transition. And I think the first thing I started with was cutting out milk. And I think we're lucky to live in a time where there's so many vegan alternatives available now that probably weren't there when, you know, our parents' generation were growing up. So having that accessibility has been really important in that transition. And also just like taking that back and questioning my own beliefs and reflecting on that. And through that, like, I've been able to, you know, gradually omit dairy from my diet. And I think also the other thing that has helped done, and this comes back to the health aspect, is a lot of the things that I felt like I was consuming that were dairy were not necessarily healthy. So you have like your ice cream or chocolate or desserts and cheese and things like that. So as I've been able to omit those or find vegan alternatives for it, I've also been able to clean up my diet in some ways and live a healthier lifestyle.